not a whole lot I don't know about steel making or iron making. If you have a question, ask it. I won't make up an answer. Okay, I'll tell you I don't know, but so far no one's ever asked me anything I didn't know. No, but just to give you some background here, Tannehill looks a whole lot different today than it did 1865. Okay, they started making iron here in the 1820s. Okay, so there's like 40 years they were making iron along Roofs Valley Creek, the Tannehill Mill Creek, and so forth. So forth. And they use wood charcoal as a fuel. Okay, so when you look around here, after 30 years or so of making iron and using trees, there probably wasn't a tree within 10 miles of here. It had all been cut down and converted into charcoal, so it was wide open. Okay, that looks like a hill behind you. It's not really a hill; it's a plateau. Okay, that's where the stockpile, the iron ore, okay, the charcoal and the limestone, which are the three elements you need to make iron, was stored in back there. All the labor force here were black slaves, all of them. Okay, the iron master and his assistants were all white guys. Okay, they were not Southerners. Okay, they were from Ohio and Pennsylvania. Why? Because if you want to learn how to make iron, that's where you went. You went up to Ohio and Pennsylvania to learn your trade. And you have to remember, there's no instrumentations on this furnace at all, none. Okay, it's a feel for how it runs. It's an art, really. But all the material was stored back there. As I said, all the labor was black slaves. Probably 70% of the slaves, all they did was cut trees and make charcoal. Okay, these furnaces were built. Number 1 was built in 1859. Okay, number 2 and 3 were built in 1862 by the Confederate government. All 3 furnaces combined, all 3 were running at the same time, and they wouldn't, because they run independent of each other. They made about 20 tons of iron a day. Okay, to do that, okay, for every ton of iron, they consumed over a ton of charcoal. That's a lot of trees. Okay, a lot of trees. This thing has no bells and whistles on it. This is a true charcoal using furnace. Okay. Now the reason, though, there was a very good reason why those Yankees came down here to make iron. Okay. You know what that reason was?
Iron ore.
No, money.
Cheap labor.
The guys that ran these furnaces and the assistants, okay, they were paid in specie. They were not paid in Confederate money or paper dollars or anything else. They were paid in gold and silver. They were paid in specie, and they were very well paid. Okay. The labor force outside of the iron master, there were cabins all up and down. That trail, Ironworks Trail, it's called. Okay, on that trail going back to the slave thing, I'll take you to Farley Field. Okay, there are 16 double-wide cabins there where most of the labor force lived. Okay, and by some of the things that have been dug up archaeologically indicate that not only the slaves lived there, but middle-income whites also lived there. But what they would do is they would each furnace would have had a trestle, wouldn't have been just one. Okay, no roof. Okay, the roof would have been burnt off the minute you opened the door up down there. Okay, these furnaces run somewhere between 1800 and 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, and that's not yellow hot, red hot, blue hot. That's white hot. Okay, as a matter of fact, you put water on molten iron, you're going to have an explosion because it turns to steam instantly. So, well, what they would do is the iron master would determine what the blend was. Now, they used obviously twice as much charcoal as they did limestone and iron ore. Okay, there's some, matter of fact, right back there's a pile of iron ore from 1976. In 1976, they rebuilt number 1, and they ran it for about 2 months. A lot of modern help going with it. Okay, but they made iron here. That iron was used to make the cannon barrels you see here in the park, and another park here. That iron was actually used. One thing about charcoal furnace, the worst thing you can have in iron is sulfur. okay? And wood doesn't have any sulfur in it. Coal does, okay? So when you make iron today and use coke as a fuel rather than thing, with charcoal, the iron that comes out of a modern day blast furnace goes to a desulfurization station where they put limestone and some other stuff in to take the sulfur level out before they put it into a furnace to make steel. In the 1860s, they did not make steel. They did not understand the chemistry of the metal. When they made steel, it was by accident. They knew if you kept adding carbon to iron, you would make steel, but it tended to be brittle and so forth. Now they had a lot of wrought iron, okay, and they made steel, high carbon steel in small quantities, not like we do today. But they would load, the iron master would determine the load on the furnace. Okay, he'd give instructions up here, and they would load carts up with iron ore, limestone, and charcoal. And they'd go across the trestle, and would open that door up. Now, it's very interesting when you remember it's a blast furnace. It operates under air pressure. Blast furnace, okay? You inject air into the bottom, okay? And the inside of the furnace is a venturi tube, okay? Which means that you can push air in at the bottom, say at 100 psi, okay? Chemical reaction, the heat and everything else. As it goes up in the furnace, the venturi tube takes over. You can have 1,000 pounds per square inch at the top of the furnace versus 100 at the bottom. So that's what keeps the solid stuff suspended in the furnace, is that air pressure. Now the real trick is, okay, when you want to tap the furnace or charge it, okay, you have to lower that pressure inside the furnace. Okay, Iron Master, that's it, it's an art. He didn't have any instrumentations to tell him how to do this. But when they're going to charge the furnace, okay, they tap at the same time. And what they do is they lower the air pressure inside the furnace, not enough to let that burden, the solid stuff, slip. Okay, you don't want it to go to the bottom of the furnace, and you can safely open that door without being burned alive. Okay, that's why there was no roof there in the first place. Probably wasn't a rail. OSHA wasn't around. They didn't worry about if somebody fell off the catwalk, off the trestle. They would keep that solid stuff suspended in the furnace while you tap at the bottom and you charge up here at the top. And this has no bell mechanism. It's open, top to bottom, and you can see that. And you go down below and look up, you can see it's open, wide open from the bottom. So what they would do, they fill mixture, iron ore, limestone, and charcoal to the top of the furnace. Hopefully the guys at the bottom are done tapping the iron out. They close the door, they turn the wind back up. Okay? From top to bottom, 16 to 18 hours on this furnace. Okay? When you charge, it depends on when you're going to tap. And I'll explain how you tap when you get down here. We know when all the furnaces were built. We know who worked here. We know approximately what the labor force was and everything else. Okay, we also know exactly when everything ended. Okay, it all ended on one day, March 31st, 1865. Okay, two companies of 8th Iowa Cavalry, part of I'll get to his Croxton's brigade. Okay, came down Eastern Valley Road. The road is the same place is now than it was, except when you get into Bessemer, it was a little bit farther east. Okay, he came right past 3 antebellum homes, which are still there. The Owens, McAdories, and the Sadlers. Okay, and those houses were open periodically. Okay, the Historical Society opens them up for tours and so forth. But he came right by those houses. When he got down here, there was no road. There was a tramway that came along Bucks Creek, Mud Creek, that brought in the iron ore and limestone, okay, which was mine, a mile and a half from here. They brought it in on a donkey turn or horse-drawn wagons, and then it was brought up here to the top. Remember, everything works by gravity here. There's no electricity, really. It's all gravity. It does all the work. But they would bring that stuff in, okay, and store it here at the top. Well, when he got down here, the Montevallo Bucksville Stagecoach Road that comes right through Farley Field out there. Well, that's the way he came in the park. That cavalry. There were no Confederate troops here to defend the place. Nobody here but us workers. Okay, he came down in that at Farley Field. He came down that trail right past all the cabins and the slave quarters, and set fire to every building as they came along. And we found used Spencer rifle cartridges. Remember, these troopers were all armed with 7-shot repeating rifles, all of them, all 1,200, all 300 or 400 that were here. Here, they were probably shooting the livestock or the dog or whatever, okay, or scaring the people that lived here, because everybody just headed for the hills. They couldn't defend the place. And they came in right about where the bridge is at, okay, across the creek, and caught the furnaces in operation. Okay. Now, his objective was to destroy this place, because it was an industrial complex. Where the museum is today, there was a tannery, okay, and it was a big building about the same time. And we know he burnt down every building, because every place that's been excavated, there's a layer of charcoal on top of the foundation stuff. So you know the buildings were burnt down. Okay. So he came in here, number 1 and 2 were in operation. 3 appears to be in the stage of a reline, because it's empty. Okay, it's empty. 2 was running, and so was number 1. Now, the quickest way to destroy a blast furnace, what do? Take the air pressure off of it. Okay, shut the air off. Everything in the inside of the furnace goes boom, drops right to the bottom, and the furnace collapses upon itself. Okay, you're out of operation. You got to completely rebuild the thing. Okay, you're done. Okay, well, number 1 was full of iron in '76. When they redid it, they cleaned it all out. And I can show you down below what that stuff looks like when they cleaned it out. Okay, number 2 is still full of iron today. It was never cleaned out and everything else. But March 31st, 1865, they put the thing. They set fire to the charcoal stores in what we have. It burnt for almost a month. Okay, there's a lot of charcoal up here that they set fire to. So, any questions at this time?
Carl, inside the furnace where the ore and the lime and all that goes, what's that lined with?
Brick. Okay, this was manufactured locally, clay brick made locally. Okay, you have to remember, operating at 2,000 plus degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, the brick will glaze inside. That's what makes the burden. It'll be able to move up and down. Today's blast furnaces, they have water coolers, and they have a special refractory brick and so forth. The lining on this furnaces here probably lasted maybe 3 to 4 months before it was burnt out. And if your burden slips, it takes the dang brick off the wall. Okay, so now you got a problem. They didn't have gunning back then.
Oh, so when you had a load in there to turn the furnace off for maintenance or whatever, you had to make sure it was all drawn down and utilized.
Yeah, you had to clean it out. Now, today's blast furnaces, I'll use my hands, have bells. They're bell shaped. There's a bell here and there's a bell here. Okay, and what they do when they charge a new modern blast furnace, they don't take the wind off. What they do is they lower this, they dump the material in and load this bell up with material. This bell goes back up, this bell goes down, that stuff goes in the furnace. You don't lose 1 minute of operation. Wow. Okay. Yeah, you got a question? I got to get up here close. I don't have my hearing aids in.
Do the furnaces still work today?
Well, they would. This one worked in 1976, and after they shut it down, they cleaned it out, and you look, it's new inside. It's open all the way to the top. I'm sorry I can't get you out there. And I'm gonna get that Ranger. We'll find out what's wrong with that lock.
How often did they have to shut them down and redo it?
Well, first of all, you got to get it down. Okay, you get it completely empty, and they would have to strip the brick out from inside, and then they would rip back. They'd probably be down 2-3 weeks. Okay, you know, modern blast furnaces are now 3-4 months because they redo the water coolers. And you have to remember, they got a lot of instrumentation on the modern. They analyze the gas at the top of the furnace, so they know what's in the thing. They search for hot spots where the inspectors go. You can tell when you got a hot spot on the furnace. And of course, they got a huge steel line. This has got a brick furnace, sand or chert, and then sandstone blocks. All these blocks that are on these furnaces came from those trails where you walked up here. Okay, they were all cut off the side. When you get down, I'll point out you can see the tool marks on the rocks. Okay. Any other questions?
Was there like any recorded accidents at the furnace during its operation?
Why not?
Was there any recorded accidents during its operation?
Not that we found.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm sure
Okay.
there was. I said there was no rail on this trestle. They wouldn't have wasted the material and the man hours to put railings on here. And besides that, there were slaves running back and forth. The slaves were not owned by the Ironworks. They were owned by the local plantation owners, and they were rented. Okay, they provided room and board, and they rented them. But in the wintertime, you didn't need the slaves. Bring them all down here. We'll cut trees and make charcoal. Okay, so well, it depends on the labor force. Okay, there was probably less than 200 slaves, but like I said, 70% of them were out in the woods cutting down trees and making charcoal. And wood charcoal. And you got to remember, the native tree here was a longleaf pine. They're big boys. Okay, but after 25 or 30 years of making iron, and these furnaces suck it up maybe 20 tons of iron, 20 tons of charcoal a day. Like I said, they probably wanted a tree within 10 miles of them. Okay, the place was real easy to find. Okay, when they came down Eastern Valley Road, the land was clear. They obviously could see the smoke and so forth. When this furnace was under wind, what we call wind on it, there was a flame about 25 feet high. Blue flame came out of the top of the furnace. It was pretty spectacular to see it.
How long did it take to rebuild it once the historic preservation came in and they decided to rebuild it to its original? How long did it take them to rebuild?
It probably these furnaces, if they were intact, they just had to reline them. Probably took them 3 weeks to a month to redo it. So they weren't continuous. Blast furnaces run seven days a week, 24 hours a day until they go down. Modern blast furnaces run 10, 12, 15 years on a brick lining before they take them down. That's the most expensive part of steel making, is making steel, liquid steel, to make products. That's 70% of the cost. 70% of a piece of steel is cost. You see a coil of steel, okay, and it sells for $12,000. 70% of that cost was making the liquid metal. It's not a cheap operation. That's why there are very few integrated plants like Fairfield Works. They tore their blast furnace down because now they're going to make steel with electric furnaces. And what they do is they melt scrap, and they use what we call direct reduced iron, which is like a briquette. Iron and charcoal coat pressed together. Okay.
Big pellet stove.
Yeah. Okay. Here, we'll go over here. Yeah, no question, what you got?
Or tubes.
Yeah, that's iron ore. See, and that's probably 60% iron. You get a lot of slag out of ore.
Yeah.
Modern blast furnaces use what's called a taconite pellet, and it's an iron.
Yeah.
It's iron ore.
Here, so.
They crush it,
Like a marble.
wash it.
Yep.
Okay, so there's nothing but really iron oxide left. Then you put a binder in it, and they make marbles. That's it.
I know,
That's
we used to escort.
Okay,
Hey, Carl. We used to escort the barges on the Great Lakes from Canada and across with the tagonite.
oh yeah,
They're nice little bullets.
That's about 90%
They feel heavy.
iron. Okay, so you got a whole lot less slag. Okay. Not only that, it melts quicker than ore does. Sure.
My uncle worked.
That's a piece of coke.
I worked in 3 foundries.
That's from 1976. They did not use wood charcoal when they refired the furnace. They used modern coke.
What did the ore look like when it came out of the hillside? Was it
Big
blazing?
rocks.
Like right over there.
There you go. Right over there.
Okay. Just red rock?
If you go in the museum, there's a big piece of iron ore there. It just hasn't
Okay.
been busted up.
All right.
That's all.
My uncle worked at Pine
Oh, you're cool.
Yeah, that's what they did mine
Cool.
down
That's modern. See, that's a lot heavier than a piece of iron ore.
Glad you came over.
Because it's been
It's a
fine.
little drive for you.
Over there is a pile of limestone rock. Okay. By the way, the iron ore that came from about a mile and a half out there. Real nice subdivision now. Lakes, because the pits are all full of water. Okay. But they mined the ore over there. Republic Steel did until the early 1950s. Okay. Limestone. There's plenty. That's one thing about Alabama. That's why they got so much iron making. Well, my son and Mike think you needed iron ore, limestone, fuel, smoke, charcoal, a lot of it. Now, I'm going to go down that way, which is a little bit longer, but it's not near as steep. And I don't have my hike. The burden that got cold, you know, it comes out. You can see the iron ore, these pieces of limestone and all that kind of stuff. That's only, you know, it's called a clinker anyway. Just like, well, when you clean the furnace out, that's a lump that's in the bottom when it goes cold.
Where's the limestone?
Where's the limestone in? I'm pretty sure that's all the little white. Is the limestone all the white specks?
That's white, the white stuff in it. Now you can see on the side. But that came out of the furnace.
That's like leftover?
Yeah, no, that's what came out of it after it was shut down in 1976.
Okay.
Obviously, there was a lot of coke, but you can see the iron ore. You know.
So how, like when they did that, then they opened that little gate thing and moved all that? Okay.
I'm going to show you.
Be, brother.
I'm going to show you.
I mean, that has to be work.
Yeah, let me make a drawing here. I'll kind of explain what goes on here. Now, it's circular, so I would be standing inside the furnace. Okay? Now, how do we know when to tap the furnace? Okay? We don't have any instrumentation or anything else. Well, on this furnace, there'd be a place at the bottom of the furnace called a Bosch. Okay, it'd be above it called a wicket hole. Okay, and when the iron goes up in the furnace, we've got slag. The iron impurities. Okay, you gotta remember those guys. There's twice as much limestone in there. And what happens is when the limestone and the iron ore melt at about the same temperature, the limestone, calcium, okay, it grabs all the impurities out of the iron, and it forms what we call slag. Okay, and it's lighter. The iron ore, the iron is heavy. It goes to the bottom of the furnace, and the slag floats on top, like oil on top of water. Okay, so there's two levels of liquid in the furnace. There's iron ore in the bottom, or iron, molten iron, and there's slag on top. Well, as the iron level raises in the furnace, it pushes the slag up until it gets to the wicket hole. And you'll see a little trickle of slag coming out. We know the bottom, the Bosch furnace is full of iron. Time to tap the furnace. Okay, so the iron master, he'll up above, he'll tell them what kind of blend he wants, and they get ready. Okay, and they're going to tap the furnace. How many borrow your stick? And what they do, I'll show you the tap hole up there. They knock a hole in the furnace, and the molten iron, because it's not under a lot of pressure, if you tapped it with full wind, you better not be out down here, okay? Because it's going to squirt like a squeezed lemon, okay? And that's 1,800 to 2,000 degrees molten iron coming out of it, okay? Well, they're going to knock a hole in the furnace, and it comes down a runner. And if you go in a museum, they're great things, okay? And they got these little things off on the side. And a guy will stand down here like a paddle, and he'll direct this stuff off on the side. It runs down here into what these things are, all pigs. Okay, been called pig iron for at least 2,000 years. Okay, I don't make it up. Okay, somebody way back when looked at that and said it looked like a sow pig laying on her side with her piglets attached, and the term pig iron stuck. That's why it's, so even today it's called pig iron.
Now, when they were doing this, would they have had molds and stuff there also?
Yeah, they could have. They could
Okay.
have. They could have cast at the same time.
Okay.
Okay. If you look at some of the scenes from the 1880s, that are the big pictures in the museum, you can see that as this stuff went to grade, okay, somebody came along with a sledgehammer, you broke it up into pigs. All the iron that was made here was put on ox carts, went up that trail to the railhead in Montevallo. From there, it went down to Selma Naval Arsenal, and it was remade into tools, shovels, axes, brook cannon, munitions, and whatever they needed the metal for. It went down there, and it was remelted in a cupola, which is the mini blast furnace. Furnace is not like this, but they had to remelt it. But they went, all the iron that was made here during the Civil War went to Montevallo, went down to Selma Naval Arsenal. Okay? There, you can have your stick back. Watch out, you're in the furnace. 76. None of this is dates are from the Civil War. Outside, well, the brick is original, or the outside of the furnace, okay, is original. Okay, that pipe up there is called a bustle pipe. That's where the air compressed air from the blower house over here. They had a water wheel bellows. It was a double bellows like this. Okay, I don't know how much pressure they got. 2 and 3 had a steam-powered compressor. Okay, so they were probably a little more efficient. Okay, and they used ambient temperature air. They didn't preheat the air. It probably ran better in the summer than it did in the winter, because the air we going in was hot.
Right, hotter.
Hot. What they would do is they would come up here. Air comes from the bustle pipe, comes down in here, and it would be injected through what we call a twir. Okay, like a fuel injected nozzle, directly above the Bosch. But they cut a hole there, and that's just clay brick, and it would run down this iron or stone runner out here, on here, and this would be the cast board where it would be cast in the pigs. Today's blast furnaces don't use ambient air. Okay, they preheat the air to 2,000 degrees, okay, before it is injected into the furnace. And when they inject that air into the furnace, they use pulverized coal, oxygen, and natural gas at the same time. So today's blast furnaces are continuous cast. They make a lot of iron, like the one at Fairfield made about over 5,000 tons a day. Number 13 at Ironworks makes about 8,000 tons of iron a day. That's, but you can go up and you can look in. Let me see if I can see any of these stones have tool marks on them. I can point that out. Yeah. These are all original to the furnace, obviously, but the bustle pipe was there. Oh, it's better over here.
For the drill holes and stuff.
Yeah, there's some on the other side. There's really got to be some here too.
Okay.
Here you can see the tool marks.
Yeah.
Well, they cut this block off the side of that hill. Okay, what they did is they used a star drill and a mallet, and they cut a hole down in on the side like this, and then they would put iron wedges in there and fracture the rock, make it a block, and then haul it down here and use it.
Yeah, there's some right there. Good ones right there.
Yeah, you can see it right there. But all the blocks that you see here, all of it came from the side of that hill.
Carl,
How
you
did
said they
do
put a
that?
hole in the furnace. Where do they do that?
On that side, where the little round thing was,
Yeah.
that's where bunch of
Bunch of
holes.
holes. That's where it comes out.
Okay.
How did they get it all the way
Oh,
up
are
there?
you old enough to remember U.S. Steel Hour? They were tapping an open hearth furnace. And they used a dynamite charge. And they blew it. It would shake. Okay? And knocked a hole in the furnace. And of course, steel would run out. And they'd have a steel pot and a slag pot. Okay? Really spectacular to see an open hearth tap. Damn few of those off people. The ones we had at Geneva were 200 tons. 200 tons, 5.5, 6 hours.
Wow.
Okay.
I remember it, my grandmother, she lived in Brighton, and my dad, my grandfather worked with Ironworks. And I remember being on the front porch at night, and you see the sky just turn red.
Now, what happens is because they take the slag pot, they have a slag dump. Okay? And they take it out, when they dump it, it's liquid in it, molten.
Oh, yeah.
So, but they have water sprays and so forth. Never has any steel in that slag dump because when you don't see it. I remember I was working, we were about 50 yards away from the slag dump, and they were dumping a thimble, and all of a sudden it went from red to white. Okay, and it was the damnedest explosion you ever saw.
Yeah.
I mean, the minute that steel hit that water,
Yep.
holy crap!
Well, it's like doing
It set
bullets.
fire
so
to half the
speak.
places around Fairfield. I mean, it's like if you've ever been in a bombing raid and you see that compressed air ring coming at you, okay, that's exactly what it was. That blazer went. I mean, more people did hurt. Now, where did the slag go? We know where the iron went. Where did the slag go? Okay.
It's coming out the top, right? Squirting out the top of the.
You're
Yeah.
empty.
As you drain the iron out, you're going to get slag last.
Oh.
So they would have a slag pit, and the guy would direct the slag over in the pit. When he got the hole, they broke it up, put it in the wagon, and it went down the farther field. Okay, the slag is about 7 or 8 feet deep down there. That's why when it rains, there's very few puddles. Because the ground sucks up the water like a sponge. That's where all the slag
They
is.
just dumped it there?
Huh?
It's just a dumping area?
Yeah, it was dumped.
Okay.
So that's where they dumped the slag from. Okay? Now, two, the furnaces operated the same. 2 and 3 operated the same way as number 1 did. Okay, it's funny. This time of year, it gets a little warm. Okay, boy, the snake's like number 3 over there because it's empty and it's always warm. Okay, and when I have school tours down here, I always double check because you have to watch. They'll be laying out on the brick. Okay, and I've seen them at the top. If they disappear as quick as you see them, but they get in and out of that furnace anyhow. I'm sure it's full of snakes right now. It's that time of year before they're coming out. Okay.
So this was still full of iron.
This one's still full of iron. Now it's probably it's got molten iron, slag, and whatever was in the burden came down. Okay. When I moved here, oh gosh, 1989. Okay, these furnaces were collapsed. Okay, because they've been destroyed. I said, it gets cold in there, and they collapse upon themselves. They were piles of rock with trees blowing out. Okay, original stuff is here. The iron and steel engineers rebuilt them using as much original material as possible. Okay, but the top half of the furnace, not the bottom half, but the top half of the furnace is completely collapsed.
You see the difference in the rock though.
Yeah.
Now you can see 2 marks on this, on the blocks here really well too. Now, obviously they had muscle pipe that went around this one. Okay, on that end was a steam compressor. Okay, that provided the air pressure, and in between here, in this tunnel, was all the. By the way, in the summertime, this is the coolest place in the world. But all the air pressure controls and everything else were in this tunnel. Okay, when these furnaces were running, it was probably the hottest place on earth. It was probably hotter than Hades in here.
stuff. You're fine.
Yeah, I think this is where he says the snake shelter.
This was owned by Republic Steel. So they come in and they, if it wasn't, if it was underground, they didn't find it. But anything above ground, they stripped. It went right over the Republic Steel that remained in steel. But this is where the steam compressor was, probably the air pressure for the thing. Yeah, you know, people ask, why wasn't it rebuilt? Same reason those Yankees came down, only the opposite way. 1865, there was no money. Okay, but what happened was, Tennessee Coal and Iron, in the late 1870s, 1880s, Birmingham, that's called Coal and Magic City, because it grew overnight. Okay, all the steel, iron and steel. Okay, but steel making had changed. These furnaces wouldn't have been very efficient anyway, okay, compared to a modern furnace in the 1880s. 1880s is long gone. Okay. And coal, you took coal and made coke, it was a lot cheaper than wood charcoal. Hey, one of the reasons they went to coke, they were running on trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I learned a lot.
Now, what's the blower house?
Okay, that's was a water wheel, and there was a double bellows in there run by that water wheel. And that provided the air pressure for number one. Here we had a steam compressor, okay, that provided the air pressure for both these furnaces.
Thank you.
They were not very energy efficient. Not very energy efficient. They used a lot of fuel for the amount of iron we got that they made. These go on, like 29, 39, 49, 59. And the water pressure with the dam. Well, shooting through the clean. There's a sluice gauge right down there. It might be open. I think it is open. They open it up, flush that out once in a while. When I moved here, a couple years ago, okay, you didn't know this was here. It was collapsed and filled in. The University of Alabama did an archaeological dig down there. Oh, guess what? There's a raceway. Comes up here and goes down there.
All my years of living here, this hasn't been open very long.
Well, no. Okay. The wheel is still there.
There's the
Okay,
water.
but it drove, and it was double pump bellows. So you had constant flow of air. It was a double bellows.
Is that the original wheel?
I think that is the original wheel. It just took to it. You got to remember, most of the stuff was under dirt. They didn't waste time to dig it up.
Why does the water wheel not spin today? Why is the water wheel not spinning?
Oh, well, the water's not deep enough to make that wheel turn. That's why. There's a gate right there. That allows where you allow water. Yeah.
There's the gate there.